The Konishiroku Hexanon 48mm f2 is the lens that was part of Konica 3, a 35mm fixed lens rangefinder camera that was made in Japan and released on the market in 1956. Back then, it had a price tag of $124.75, which made it one of the most expensive rangefinder cameras at the time. Popular Photography magazine reviewed it in 1958, and they concluded that the lens used in the Konica 3 ranks among the very finest. The optical design of this lens consists of 6 elements in 5 groups. The aperture is clickless and ranges from f2 to f22. This lens accepts filters with 35.5mm diameter. The diaphragm is made of 5 rounded aperture blades. On the back, this lens is quite different. Once I removed it from the Konica 3, it had no mount and no focusing helicoid. In order to adapt it to my Sony camera, I used an M25 to M42 adapter and an M42 to NEX 17 to 31mm focusing helicoid. First, I screwed the adapter to the back of the lens, just like so. And once that was in place, it was time to screw the focusing helicoid to it. Once both parts were attached securely to the lens, I was ready to use it with my Sony camera. This lens weighs 232 grams, and that includes the adapter and the focusing helicoid. When this lens was part of the Konica 3, it had a pretty long minimum focusing distance of 91 centimeters. But when adapted to Sony in the way I just described, the minimum focusing distance shrinks down to 33 centimeters. The Konishiroku Hexanon 48mm f2 is an amazing little lens that is a real joy to use. I can't begin to talk about this lens without mentioning how tiny and well built it is. This is perhaps the smallest and also one of the prettiest lenses I've had the pleasure to review so far. I felt like I was using a perfectly machined jewel. This lens is extremely well designed, and even though it's super small, it has a very nice weight to it. It's made entirely out of metal, it has a beautiful finish, and it feels super sturdy. When it comes to image quality, the 6-element Hexanon does not disappoint. It produces sharp photographs even wide open. Here is a 100% crop of the previous image, which was shot at f2. When you stop this lens down, the sharpness gets even better with amazing quality across the frame. Even though its widest aperture is only f2, the out-of-focus blur that this lens produces is nice and smooth, and it creates pretty great 3D pop. Surprisingly, even though this lens is more than 60 years old, it has barely any chromatic aberrations. It's amazing to see a single-coated lens from such a long time ago that can control chromatic aberrations so well. Also, I did not notice any vignetting even when I was shooting at f2. Since the diaphragm is made of 5 aperture blades, you can expect the typical pentagonal shapes in your out-of-focus lights whenever you stop the lens down. There are a couple of minor issues that I notice about this lens. Number 1 is its slight loss of contrast whenever I was shooting it wide open in bright conditions. So if you want to try adapting this lens, I'll advise you to use it with a lens hood, which definitely helps. But as soon as you stop the lens down, contrast improves a lot, and this lens produces excellent images. The colors that come out of this Hexanon are not as saturated and punchy as some later Konica lenses that I've reviewed here on the channel, and I can describe them as neutral and more true to reality, which is most likely due to this lens being single-coated. The other issue that I noticed was a small amount of barrel distortion, especially when shooting at closer distances, but that is easily corrected in post. So all in all, this is a beautifully made little lens that produces images with excellent sharpness. It's ridiculously tiny, and is quite easy to adapt to digital, even though it was never meant to be removed from the Konica 3. I had a lot of fun using this wonderful lens from the 50s, and if you decide to adapt it, I hope you'll enjoy it as much as I did. For those of you who would like to try this do-it-yourself project, I decided to put together a few notes that will help you adapt this lens to digital. First, you need to make sure that the lens is set to bulb mode. Second, you need to open the film door by pressing this little half circle that's at the bottom of the camera, and the film door simply pops open. Next, you need to unscrew the retaining ring that holds the lens to the camera body. I use just a tiny screwdriver to do this, but any other small tool that will fit in the little notches will work just fine. Once you unscrew the retaining ring, the lens simply comes out. After that, all you need to do is make sure the shutter stays open, and you do this by pushing the red lever up, which cocks the shutter. Once the shutter is cocked, you push the chrome lever down and the shutter opens. Now you just need to insert something in the space between the two levers so the shutter does not close back up. I put a small piece of metal that I cut to size, but anything else that can fit in that spot will work just fine. After that, you simply need to get the two adapters that I showed you earlier, and you're good to go. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time here at Vintage Optics.